Welcome to Flipping the Table. Today, Michael talks with Josh and Rebecca Tickell, the husband and wife producers and directors of the new film Common Ground, which is currently screening in theaters across the nation. Their conversation focuses on the opportunity regenerative agriculture offers to those who produce our food, something critical today in a world where farmers and ranchers are stressed by immense economic, ecological, and societal challenges. The film features farmers, ranchers, scientists, policymakers, and some of the biggest names in film and television, all of whom want to see our farmers and ranchers thrive, our kids and families be healthy, and our nation remain strong, vibrant, and a leader in meeting the challenge of climate change. Enjoy the show.
Those listening to this podcast know I've been focused for most of the year on what is called regenerative agriculture. We've tried to define it because it is quickly replacing the terms organic and sustainable in the nation's popular discourse. My guests today, Josh and Rebecca Tickell, give us the best definition I've yet seen, along with much more, in their new feature documentary film, Common Ground. Both Josh and Rebecca are veteran filmmakers with over a dozen films behind them. I especially like their 2021 film called Revolution Generation, which reveals incredible facts and stories about the emerging power of millennials. Their new film, Common Ground, builds off their 2020 film, Kiss the Ground, which focused on the value and power of soil. That film was controversial in my world because many colleagues felt it did not really address the realities faced by mainstream farmers and the structural system imposed by industrial food companies. I had disagreed with many activist colleagues because I saw the film's ability to awaken mass audiences to the need to focus on soil. And by the way, activists are not the general public. We are nerds, and our slow progress reveals our good food movement has much to learn from communication artists like Josh and Rebecca. That's why our team at Roots of Change is actively working to build the audience for this new film. I will be in conversation with Rebecca and Josh at the screenings of Common Ground in San Francisco and San Rafael later this month. Check out our website for dates and times, and please bring your friends. Common Ground is very different than Kiss the Ground because it puts the focus on the larger system and the farmers and ranchers who have been demonstrating the financial success that comes with using regenerative practices. The film also reveals how the current dominant industrial system victimizes our farmers and ranchers, rural communities, and everyone's health in the name of stakeholder profit, which is extracted from rural communities. Before we begin, I will say that I hope any farmers and ranchers who are listening will hang in to the end. Some of the comments at the front end might cause discomfort because they are critical of agriculture. But please wait and see how our conversation develops. I trust you will come to appreciate why the film is called Common Ground. So enough said. Let's hear from Rebecca and Josh. So, Josh and Rebecca, thank you for joining me today to talk about your new film, Common Ground. Really happy to have you. How are you doing?
Oh, Michael, we're so excited to be with you, and we're doing well. This is the most amazing thing that we've ever been involved with.
And we could not be more happy than to be talking to you right now on Roots of Change.
That's great. Well, I know that you're rolling the film out, screening all over the United States. I know you've been at it already for weeks, so we want to talk about that. And where are we connecting with you today? Where are you today?
We're on our little farm in 𝘊𝘰𝘮𝘮𝘰𝘯, California.
One of the most beautiful places in the state of California. So
it sure is, but it's also one of the places that has a huge amount of conventional agriculture happening. So we're kind of creating regeneration, but in the middle of a very big agricultural county that has in place some of the most degrading agricultural practices. So we're in the right spot.
Yeah, I'll say. So let's talk about Common Ground, the film, which is all about regenerative agriculture. And so why don't you share with us your origin story. How did you come to this? And please do talk about Kiss the Ground, your previous film, which I enjoyed very much.
Well, if you want to go way back,
Yeah.
for me, I got interested in environmental issues because I grew up in Louisiana. And I grew up in the middle of an oil refinery area, hundreds of petrochemical facilities in a very, very small area. And the cancer rates there are 800 times the national average. And that's according to the Times-Picayune, which is an actual newspaper from there. So as a young person, I became very interested in environmental solutions because the problems were very obvious. People were getting sick because of environmental pollution. And that led me on this long, strange journey, which culminated in a van powered by used cooking oil called the Veggie Van. And through that, I actually met Rebecca.
Well, I saw him on the Today Show when I was about 17, driving that very veggie van that now sits in our backyard and hopefully will be off of cinder blocks soon. And I've been trying to turn it into a tiki bar,
but I promise it's almost
Josh
done.
says it must drive on.
I promise we've got the new engine in. It's almost ready.
And I actually started off in show business when I was 8 years old. I was in a Christmas film called Prancer. And it's a story of a little girl who lives on a farm. Her dad is played by Sam Elliott, and they live on a farm in Indiana that's struggling, and he's struggling, and the family is struggling. And it's about her finding hope, saving who she believes, Prancer, who she believes to be, Santa's reindeer, and ultimately about restoring that connection with her dad. And so, I made a movie about farming at 8 years old, and it ended up being one of the top Christmas movies. And it really spurred me to have an insatiable drive to make films that touched people's hearts. And so I remember that moment so clearly, seeing Josh on TV and being so inspired by what he was doing and creating this movement. And he was, driving around and showing people this other way that we could do it that felt so much more natural to me. And then I came out to Hollywood and I got cast in all these other types of films that really like horror movies. And that was not, I was like in a Clive Barker horror movie, giving birth to a alien baby on the basement floor of a monastery that then tried to eat me. And it was really in that moment that I realized that it was time for me to have a career change. And it was shortly after that I ran into Josh and his veggie van. And really the rest was history, because it was right after that we got engaged and we worked on our film Fuel, which told his story of coming from Louisiana and helping to jumpstart the biodiesel movement. And that was about 20 films ago. And the other thing that really brings me to this issue is I come from a legacy farming family in the Midwest. I can trace my farming roots back to Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, all the way back into the 1700s. And so my family, my dad used to stand in vats of DDT and 2,4-D all the way up to his shoulders. And all of my aunts and uncles have paid the price for being exposed to these chemicals every single day on the farm growing up. And I have witnessed firsthand the cost that farming families pay for this way of agriculture that's not just degrading the land. It's not just disconnecting food from its ability to be nutritious. And it's not just destabilizing the climate because of desertification. It is forcing farmers who've been doing this for generations and generations to go bust. And so, this journey with my dad, having been a conventional farmer, and then him for the first time ever after Kiss the Ground came out and these long conversations, he started growing organic vegetables for the first time. And so it's a miracle. It's a part of that relationship with him. He and I have very different views, but we were able to find that common ground. And it was amazing. And that was part of what shaped us telling the story in the way that we do, that really does prop up the farmer as a hero. Because in America, we have this idea of the American farmer as being this celebrated thing. But in reality, our system treats farmers like debt serfs, and we're all paying the price for that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm right now reading Wendell Berry's newest book called The Need to Be Whole, which is bringing up a lot of the same points that you brought up about what we have done to farmers in this country and what we've done, our thoughts about labor. I mean, all kinds of things. And it is it's one of the great tragedies that doesn't get discussed enough. So I'm really, really happy to hear how that's part of your message. There's a different way for us to think of and treat our farmers. So that's fantastic. So let's get into the film then. I mean, well, actually, why don't you talk a little bit about Kiss the Ground too? Because I know that was the precursor film, let's say the Act One, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, Kiss the Ground, it took us 7 years to make. Even though it came out in the middle of COVID, somehow it managed to really break through and reach that tipping point and help bring the concept of regeneration into the mainstream. So for a lot of people, watching Common Ground or hearing about Common Ground, that was their first time learning that we can actually draw down carbon and put it into soil. And by the way, it makes the soil healthy and all of the benefits when we start taking care of soil. And so that really covered that very basic concept in a way and introduced it to the world. I think it was Modern Farmer said it put regeneration on the map. I mean, obviously regeneration has been practiced by Indigenous people for a long time, but Kiss the Ground really helped reach people today and farmers today and showing them that there is an alternative to conventional agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
I think for us, Kiss the Ground was a remarkable surprise. Part of what happened with the film, of course, is we were going to premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York with all these celebrities. It was going to be amazing. And that was, January of 2020. And then came February, and then March happened. And, by February, there were people who were talking about this virus. And we were like, well, they're not going to shut down New York over a virus. Well, little did we know, right? So the world changed so radically during that period of time. People were stuck at home for a long period of time, for the most part. And when you're done watching Tiger King, what do? Right? So there was this film that was making the rounds with Woody Harrelson as a narrator, and it just blew up. It went viral. And it was an interesting combination of things. We'd made up to that point 17, 18 environmental films, all with varying degrees of success. They'd screened in the White House. We'd been shortlisted for an Oscar, all this stuff, right? But in terms of kind of mass consciousness, hadn't really hit that moment. But during COVID, people were stuck at home. A lot of people were sick, and they were asking questions like, why are we sick as a society? Why does 7 out of 10 Americans have a chronic disease related to nutrition? Well, if you got a chronic disease related to nutrition, whatever it is, whether it's insulin related issue, you've got diabetes, right? Or you've got childhood diabetes, which is on the rise. The natural question is, what does it have to do with our food? What is it in the food that has changed? And if you ask that, the next question is, where does the food come from? And what's changed about that? And you end up at soil, of course. And so millions of Americans were suddenly asking the same question at the same time. And those that had a lot of time on their hands, which was most of them, and had an internet connection and were looking for stuff to watch, stumbled upon Kiss the Ground. And so it was this confluence of consciousness, questions, and availability. And the film went astronomically viral. Of course, after COVID, the USDA reached out and they said, listen, can we have permission for your film to be screened to our employees? And we were like, oh, you mean the employees of the United States Department of Agriculture? And like, yes. It was a gratifying moment to give the USDA permission to screen the movie.
Yeah.
And they did. They all watched it. And that was one of the things that prompted them to put $20 billion, at least a commitment for $20 billion, into climate smart agriculture. They're nervous about the term regenerative still. And climate smart, it still engenders you to the big chemical companies and the big seed companies. So it's a safe middle ground. It's kind of like the Switzerland of like death agriculture and regenerative agriculture. We'll just call it smart, and then everybody can play together. But, even though it had its problems, that commitment, the first tranche of money, 2-point-something billion, a lot of that has gone to genuine regenerative projects, which is encouraging to see the government that is both, pro spraying chemicals, earth destruction, and now pro regenerative. So at least we've moved from just being pro destroying, at least we're in a schizophrenic stance where the government is both pro the bad stuff and pro the good stuff all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can say that we're working on a project Roots of Change called Growing Grass, which was funded by the Climate Smart Commodities Partnership Project, which is what you're referring to, that first program. And we are working with beef and bison producers who are practicing regenerative and going to be part of research and certification processes. And I'm quite excited about it because I think there's real opportunity. And we're having our first meeting with producers this week, actually, on Thursday. It's really exciting to know that that USDA embraced the first film, Kissing the Ground. And then is that what sparked this interest in doing a follow-up film, Common Ground?
Well,
with Kiss the Ground, we had a lot of influence, and there was a huge team. The film took 7 years to make. At one point, because the concept of regeneration or regenerative agriculture, or the idea that it could draw down carbon, the scientific community hadn't really come to a consensus around it at that point. It was all kind of coming together. And so there was a big debate about the information in the film and whether it was accurate. And we wanted to make sure that it really represented everything that we knew up until that point. And so hundreds of emails, hundreds of people, lots of weighing in. And that is ultimately what resulted in Kiss the Ground. Common Ground only had one producer, one investor. And that investor said to us, I'm in this business. I know that you only began to touch the surface with Kiss the Ground. We want you to tell any story that you want to tell, and the whole story, unfiltered. And so what came out of that is Common Ground. It took us 2.5 years to make. And it really it just goes right to the jugular of what's not working in our current food system. We kind of pull back the curtain and we take a really hard look at what are the different forces at play that are preventing this movement from really moving forward at the pace that we need for it to stabilize the climate in time and course correct. And so ultimately, that's what Common Ground is. It is a unfiltered, uncensored, deep investigative journalistic film that shows exactly the levers of power that are keeping this from becoming mainstream and also keeping farmers from being able to be freed up to make the transition. And that's what we have in Common Ground. And since we've started premiering it, we have definitely gotten some pushback to censor the film. And we've been asked, can we remove Monsanto from the movie? We've been asked, can we remove the section on fake meat and ultra-processed food from the film? And we're being asked this by people who have a lot of power to make this film available to a lot of people. And we are really committed that we bring this film out the way that we made it and that people have access to this information.
Yeah, you bring up a really key point. Having worked with ranchers and farmers for years on trying to provide incentives or motivation to change how farming practices are done to get to a less destructive system, a more conducive system for rural communities, for instance, it's often very hard. And a lot of the farmers feel, because they're more in debt than they've ever been, there's so many complaints about them, they're very defensive in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And you can understand where they're coming from, the fear that it would generate in a farmer or a community that's a rural community. So how do you think about how to kind of thread the needle to not make it so threatening that people don't want to hear it, and open to seeing the opportunity that's before rural communities?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. Sorry for stepping on you there a minute. Part of doing that is just telling the truth. There have been so many documentaries about food, so many documentaries about the environment, and for the most part, they're pretty depressing. I gotta say, and look, we need some wake up calls around these issues, but very few of those documentaries actually talk to farmers. Very few of them go and spend time on farms and really get into the world of what's going on with farm families. Mm-hmm. And that is fascinating because, listen, even though we have a food-centric audience, we've got a soil-centric audience that's probably listening to this podcast, for the most part, the majority of media that's produced is coastal. It's either produced on the West or the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And our perception of America is relative to the media we watch, right? And the media we watch doesn't have the perspective of a huge portion of the country that lives in the middle of the country, mm-hmm. in which, yes, there may only be 2 million registered farmers in the US that we would consider to be quote unquote real farmers. But for every farmer, there's a banker that's dealing with the loans. There's a family, there's schools, there's nurses, there's hospitals, seed distributors, and so on and so on. And so, so the multiplier effect of one person who quote unquote farms is probably in the range of 50 to 100 people.
Yep. Easy.
Well, now you're talking about a tremendous quantity of the country that's unrepresented or underrepresented in media. And part of what we wanted to do with Common Ground was tell the truth about where farming is at and where farmers are at today. And we deal with hard subjects. We deal with debt, we deal with suicide, and we deal with cancer in family farms. And then we tell the truth about what is working with regenerative farms. And we show Rick Clark. And Rick, what was great about Rick, we filmed a lot of regenerative farmers and their stories are all good, but you don't have that much time in a film. You're 100 minutes, you're in, you're out.
Right.
We wanted a farmer who was not afraid to talk about money because, people are proud. We don't like to talk about our bank accounts. That's kind of, that's sensitive territory. But Rick was bold and he was brave enough to say, look, here's how much I'm spending. Here's how much I'm making. Here are the real numbers. Come look at my books. I'm an open book. And that kind of truth speaks to so many people in the Midwest who might otherwise think that this regenerative agriculture stuff is fairy tale coastal hogwash, like tell me about the money, how am I going to sustain this operation that my family has sacrificed for generations to keep going? Mm-hmm. And that truth has never been told in a film. It's never been, exposed that so much of the $100, $200, $300, $400, sometimes $500 an acre that people are paying, it's unnecessary. It's money that's poorly spent because the soil doesn't need that stuff. B, it's part of a propaganda machine that has sold these chemicals into Middle America like a drug dealer sells an addictive drug into a community. And C, when you really boil it down, that is money that is tearing out of Middle America. You're literally ripping the money out of the middle of the country. And a good portion of it is going to companies that are overseas. So why in the world are we paying companies like Bayer Monsanto, a German-based company? Why are we paying German companies American cash to sell chemicals that kill people and destroy the soil? That is truly insane. And that's the kind of truth that we didn't want to shy away from in the film. And that's why Common Ground is sweeping the nation. It's why it's so powerful, because people are afraid to tell these truths. And we got a chance to be relatively fearless and completely uncensored.
We hope you're enjoying the conversation. If you are, please rate our podcast and offer a review. Your voice will help us grow our listener base, which helps us sustain the funding to share these conversations with the people and organizations shaping a more just and regenerative future. A future in which the food and farm businesses are helping to solve the largest challenges of our time.
I think one of the best pieces of the film, or one of the best characteristics of the film, is that it does visit with a lot, and we do hear a lot of voices of farmers. I mean, you mentioned Rick, but you have Gabe and you have several others. So do you want to just talk about some of the folks you picked and why you picked them to be in the film?
Well, I think for us, to begin with, we needed to obviously show all of the farmers who were actually out there doing it and leading the way. I mean, these are real pioneers and innovators who are taking the best of the indigenous wisdom and mixing it with, where we are today in terms of modern agriculture. And they found ways to overwhelmingly, I think it was 80%, over 80% of farmers who made that transition to regeneration saw a profit within year one. And so we really wanted to highlight some of those stories and also, of course, continue with Gabe Brown, who we saw and met, many of us met for the first time in Kiss the Ground, the incredible farmer in North Dakota, who you see in Kiss the Ground saying, where do you want your food to come from? I think the answer is obvious. And so we follow his journey some more, and it's a surprising journey, unfortunately, in Kiss the Ground. I'm not going to say too much about it, but his story is very powerful. And I think, it was a real question for him about whether he wanted to tell it. And for him, being a religious man, he really did some soul searching, and he knew that he had to tell his story, and that if it could help just one farmer, that he was going to do it. And so Gabe Brown is prominent in the film as well. And then we also wanted to show how people who aren't on big farms could get involved. So we show small scale farming, and we show that all over the US, and also urban farming, ways that people in cities can participate in growing regenerative organic food. So the film really does have access to farming for anyone, no matter who you are, whether you live in a city or whether you're on a farm or whether you're in a suburb. And then the film, instead of having a traditional narration, the film is a love letter to our children. And originally the idea was that it was, our love letter to our kids, me and Josh. We have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. And, we think about what their future will be. And it's a big motivator for Josh and I to sort of relentlessly work on this and to not quit until it's taken off and we're really doing it. And so they really are the driver for us. And we know that that's true for so many people. So the narration of the film, the backbone of the film, is this love letter to our children that says, yes, we've gotten ourselves into this situation and it doesn't have to be this way. And there is a way out, and it's called regenerative agriculture. And then it's followed with a promise that we're going to fight like hell, pardon my French, to change the course that we're on and save the future for future generations. And we were so lucky to be able to get Jason Momoa, Laura Dern, Donald Glover, Woody Harrelson, Rosario Dawson, Ian Somerhalder, who are all parents. They're all big celebrities, and they're also parents. And so they wanted to participate in writing this love letter to their kids and to lend their voice so that we could reach outside the farming community, outside the sort of traditional people that would listen to us. We really want this film to be for everybody, for anybody who eats, for anybody that's a parent, for anybody that cares about the future of humanity on Earth. And they do a great job at being the ambassadors of that for us.
Yeah, I thought that was another very interesting and powerful characteristic of the film, the fact that you had two types of characters. You had, as you're mentioning, this long list of celebrities, film actors who will appeal to the urban centers and folks who aren't in the agricultural world. But then you had the voices of the actual farmers who are in the midst of it or have experienced things. The piece about suicide, which was really powerful. The wife, that was really powerful. And then the other piece that I wanted to get to, and I think
Let me just say something real quick about Amber Dykeshorn, who we film. She's a real advocate for letting people know about farmer suicide. Her family went through it. We saw her story. We were so impressed with her ability to communicate and articulate what she and her family had done, and her willingness to do that so that other families wouldn't have to endure it as well. And I didn't know how to get a hold of her. And this is the power of community. I knew where she lived, so I called the hardware store in her town, and I asked if they knew her, and the woman was very suspicious. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of threw in there that I was in the movie Prancer as a kid, and that actually helped in a big way. Mm-hmm. And then about an hour later, I got a call from Amber. And so wow. I'm like so grateful to her and to her family for being willing to let us share her story in the film. It's so powerful.
Yeah. And what's interesting is the head of the American Farm Bureau Federation, which is really the organization that represents big agriculture in Washington, D.C. And, they're even doing ads and public service announcements about farmer suicide and calling on farmers to reach out and seek help. And I thought that's a nice synergy there. Maybe you can get, we can get some connection, some common ground around that. But the other piece I wanted to get to was the scientists you brought in. I thought that was a really intelligent thing to bring up, this connection between industrial agriculture, commodity agriculture, and the stranglehold it has on science in many ways. You want to talk about that?
Absolutely. And, folks who are listening to this podcast, they can get more information at commongroundfilm.org, commongroundfilm.org. It's a place where we put a lot of this information. We're dumping more and more information into that website every day to give people access to the science, as you said, and to some of this content. Our perspective on anytime we make a documentary, we want to have a mix of people who are practicing whatever we're talking about in the real world and people who are looking at it from a scientific perspective. And part of what the breadth of science that we wanted to show was not just ivory tower people, but people who had been part of the USDA, people who had been part of the NRCS, people who had been part of the FSA, or, major government bodies, all the way through the FDA. Because when a scientist has a moral compass and somebody says, look the other way, even if they work for a big, powerful agency, they will say, well, that's not actually how science is done. We don't just do science based on who's gushing the money hose. And so part of the interesting thing about the scientists who showed up to talk about these issues is many of them had worked at very large government agencies, and they had gotten, high accolades for their scientific rigor. And they're so rigorous that when push came to shove with corrupt money coming in to tell them what to say, they left. And that was an interesting trend that we found in the film as we interviewed people. Oh, you've got to talk to this person because they actually, people in actual government agencies couldn't talk to us for the most part, but they would refer us to colleagues who had left and therefore they could talk. So, there is a cultural war that we face around these issues. And science itself is under a microscope. It's being pushed. And it's being pushed by very powerful, very moneyed interests, not to talk about the dangers of chemicals, not to reveal the power of soil to regenerate itself with human management. Let's face it, food in North America is $1 trillion total area market. It's, aside from water, it's the one thing we can't live without. So you control the food, you control everything. And in a way, Common Ground shows, listen, that is totally antithetical to our rights as human beings, our rights as Americans, our rights as just creatures of the earth. Like, the earth produces food in a compatible way with our biology. For somebody to take that and control it and sequester it and shove it full of chemicals and then feed it back to us, especially our children, I think that's immoral. And for scientists to stand up for science and just say, look, I'm not going to do the wrong thing, and I'm going to speak the truth about what I've scientifically seen over the course of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Some of these people have been doing this for a long time. I think that's bravery and courageous. And that's what those scientists in this film did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was quite compelling. It's a very interesting mix of characters, people, voices, perspectives. And going back to my earlier question about trying to thread this needle, we're living in this super polarized moment where right and left, coasts and center, Democrats, Republicans are all, in this incredible conflict. And look what's happening in the world. You have the Ukraine, now you have Israel, threats in South China Sea. This is all context for trying to get messages out, trying to change the way people think about the world. Do you worry about the challenge of adding to the polarization? Is that a concern? We have to tell the truth, and we also have to figure out how to open minds. I mean, what are your sense of that? I mean, I keep coming back to this because I'm in the middle of it myself, working with people from all sides of this and trying to get past this impediments and the defensiveness and the view that my view is the right view.
Well, one of the things that we like to say is common ground is omnipartisan. We welcome people from different ideologies. We welcome people from different walks of life. We welcome people who have a different perspective on religion and all of the things that make us different as Americans, make us strong as a country. And the same with our planet. All of the things that make us different as people make us strong as a species. Nature needs biodiversity to flourish. As humans, we need diversity to exist. That's how we share and collaborate and create new ideas and make new things. Common ground speaks to the one thing that we all share, no matter where we come from or what we think. Literally, we are all connected to the surface of the planet. We have not devised a way to live without it. That is where our food comes from. And so, it is in some ways encompassing of everyone, and it's indifferent of all of those differences, because when you embrace the idea that you're going to turn into dirt one day, we're all going to die. What's left is whatever we convey to the next generation. The most powerful, most valuable, most important thing that we can do is safeguard the soil. And I think everyone on earth can get behind that. It's a real, absolute, universal message.
Mm-hmm. In the film, there's a whole sequence with a farmer who's elderly, and he's driving his tractor, and then he goes to the bank and he takes out a loan, and then he goes to the grain mill and he buys a bunch of chemicals and grains, and you can just really see on his face and on his old hands, the wear and tear of farming. That's my dad. And
the actual person in the film is her father.
He's my actual dad.
That's who we filmed for that sequence. Yeah.
Wow, beautiful.
Also, where we live here in Ojai, surrounded by massive farms that are exporting crops that are grown conventionally. And the conversations we're having there, I mean, we're really seeing where, I'll speak for myself, I've seen where I've been limited in my ability to communicate this. And like you said, that can put people on the defense right away. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've learned is, to lead with the things that I know are important to them. So like, I know my dad, I know he doesn't want to be on a subsidy, that goes against his whole worldview. I know that my dad wants a legacy and for his farm to live on, and then he doesn't want to harm himself or his family or his neighbors. Like, he really cares deeply about that land. Mm-hmm. He's a steward of that land. And I think the other thing that really, really resonates with farmers who are facing all these pressures is a way out. There's profit. And it's not just me saying that. This is backed by farmers just like him who have done it and taken the risk and are now reaping the benefits of that. And so, for me, it's been about learning to ask questions and then pointing to profit. I mean, when you watch Common Ground, the first thing that we dive right into is the profit, because that's really interesting. That's a way for farmers to thrive, and that's what they want. And we're all committed to that. And so that's why we put, Gabe on the poster with the cape. If you see the poster for Common Ground, it's Gabe Brown wearing this cape, and he's looking away from the degenerated field and towards the future, towards the regenerated field. And I think that that's something that every farmer, no matter what their political view, no matter if they have a noisy daughter that thinks that they know more about farming than them or not, it's something that they can relate to and will be interested in. And, my dad, he never came back to me and was like, "You're right." Like, that conversation didn't happen. Even in the conversations, it wasn't like, there was no acknowledgement that what we were saying might be true. It was in the results. It was in the fact that he started sending me pictures of his organic produce. That was how I knew. And so I don't think we're always going to get the response when we start these conversations that we think we'll have. I've been surprised over and over and over and over again. Often if I lead with the science, I'm immediately shut down. So I think if we can speak to people around the things that they're interested in, the legacy of their farm, the health and well-being of their families, and ultimately to the profit that is available from making that transition, that's how we have these conversations. That's how we all find our common ground.
I really appreciate both of your statements here about this challenge that we face of bridging the divide in the country around the way we view the world. I think that both of your responses were spot on, and I hope we'll touch people and their hearts. It touched me. I was touched by both of your statements, and because I do feel like there is a longing for a lot of people I'm meeting from different sides. They want to get past that, but no one knows how to do it. And I think that what you're bringing up is right. I mean, we need to touch hearts. And what is that about? What we share in common, the earth, the soil, totally true, the surface of the planet, and the need for this mixing of diverse, either biology or human thinking and human beings, and then our connections to our legacies and the practical need to keep a farm financially viable in this day and age. It is not easy. And particularly for mid-size and small farmers, but even the larger ones now, it's really an incredible challenge. So well done. I'm totally committed to trying to figure out ways to have people see this film who may live in far off places. So you mentioned the website, Josh, where people can go, commonground.org. And
commongroundfilm.org.
Commongroundfilm.org.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep.
Commongroundfilm.org. But also, one thought I have, I was mentioning earlier that I was up in Siskiyou County over the weekend, one of the most rural places in the state of California. They're not going to be able to see the film in a theater probably up there. Are there ways that people can host like viewings in community centers, at the Farm Bureau meeting? I mean, what are your thoughts on how we're going to get this out and maybe frame conversation so that we can get past the polarization into deeper conversation?
Yes, definitely. First thing for people to understand is we are booking locations across the country as fast as the team can work. And right now there are 50 bookings. There's probably another 50 or so real viable bookings on the books. We'll get to 200 very quickly. So if you think you've got a community and you've got a location and you want to book it and you want to put the hard work into getting them out to watch the film, let's make that happen. Go to the website, commongroundfilm.org. First button on the site is demanded at your theater. You fill out that form and you go straight into the team's email. Everybody's going to look at that and begin to work on that. So commongroundfilm.org, fill out the form. And listen, we wish we could put it on a streaming platform tomorrow. But unfortunately, there's two impediments to us right now. The streamers want us to censor this film. So we have a hashtag, don't censor Common Ground. Yeah. And the second thing is there's a strike. So even if we had a deal, even if we wanted to make that deal, we can't do that with the actors' strike happening. So we have to band together as communities to put this film into barns, churches, gymnasiums, farm fields. We have a film on the farm program that we're doing. As I said, you can get a crowd of people there, a real decent crowd. We're going to work with you to get this to happen. And we've got bookings throughout Canada. We're starting the US, not just in the US, we're starting internationally. So we understand the desire and the frustration of getting it there, and we are moving as fast as humanly possible. But meanwhile, look at the list of theaters that's on the website. It's expanding every single day. We're adding theaters. And if it's close to you, close enough to drive, get there. Vote at the box office or buy tickets for somebody else and send them. Because every single ticket sold is a vote to the US government. It's a vote to the media companies. It's a vote to the world to say, yes, we want this information. We want it uncensored, and we want the truth, and we want it to empower us in our communities to do this good work. We want farmers to be profitable. We want them to be debt-free. We want food for children to be healthy. We want it to be free of chemicals and pesticides. And we want to know that when we put that plate on the table, that our kids are safe and they're taken care of and they're not being poisoned for profiteering. That's what a ticket means to this film. So I cannot encourage people enough to get it into the theater, book it, demand it. And if it's in a theater, support it. Get there, buy tickets, give tickets. Let's make this heard everywhere.
Great. Nice way to end. Really want to thank you both, Josh and Rebecca. You've done a tremendous thing, and we look forward to having more conversations with you in San Francisco, San Rafael, and Santa Cruz in the weeks ahead. And I know you'll be doing it all across the country. And we have a list of places we'd like to see it, and we will submit that and work to have that happen. So thank you for your commitment to this topic. Not a lot of people are. So really, really glad you did it. Thank you.
Michael, thank you, and thank your beautiful listeners out there.
Yeah, we are so excited to see everyone at the Common Ground Theater or at your farm or your school, wherever you may be. We made this movie for you, and we can't wait to see you there.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to our sponsors, the Ladybug Foundation, Dan and Quincy Imhoff, Beth and Mark Wyatt, Cindy Daniel, and Doug Lipton. Roots of Change is a program of the Public Health Institute.